it's Maddie, and as you can see, I've got quite the stack of books with me today. So over the winter break, the only thing I could think I really wanted for Christmas was books. And I had a lot of Barnes & Noble's gift cards saved up. As you can probably tell, I went a little bit overboard with the amount of books I got. So today I'm just gonna be doing a quick book haul of all of the books I got. Some of them I've already read, so I'll give brief reviews of how I felt about them. Starting at the top of this list is Ocean Vuong's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. So this is one of the books I've already read. It's been on my to-read list for a very long time. Especially last semester, I was in the advanced poetry workshop, and Ocean was a poet who came up quite a few times, so I wanted to give the novel a try. This book has gotten a lot of accolades, and it's very beautiful and poetic. The main premise is that it's a letter written from a son to a mother who is illiterate, which is very much mirroring Ocean Vuong's real background. And there's a lot about family history and relationships between cultures. So really enjoyed reading this, and I'm glad I got it. The next book on my list is a collection of short stories called Being Various, which was edited by Lucy Caldwell. So back at the end of November, I was really lucky and I got to attend an event called Women Writing Northern Ireland. It was a speaker event featuring 3 authors, one of them being Lucy Caldwell, where they got to speak about their recent works and about their own lives growing up during the period known as the Troubles in Northern Ireland. When I saw this collection, I was really excited because it featured a short story from Sally Rooney, who is one of my favorite authors. I actually also just finished reading this book and really enjoyed the collection. There's a lot of variation in the types of short stories featured, and I feel like it also taught me a lot about what modern Irish literature is looking like. I also got my copy of the book signed by Lucy, so that was very fun. Next on this list is Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. I've wanted to read this book for a really long time, ever since the TV series came out on Apple TV, which I watched, I think it was 2 years ago, and I really love that series. I haven't been able to start yet, but I'm really excited. The cover is beautiful, and I've just heard so much about it. And just to read the brief synopsis on the back, it says, in the early 1900s, teenage Sunja, the adored daughter of a crippled fisherman, falls for a wealthy stranger at the seashore near her home in Korea. He promises her the world, but when she discovers she is pregnant and that her lover is married, she refuses to be bought. Instead, she accepts an offer of marriage from a gentle, sickly minister passing through on his way to Japan. But her decision to abandon her home and to reject her son's powerful father sets off a dramatic saga that will echo down through the generations. Pachinko is a story of love, sacrifice, ambition, and loyalty. Lee's complex and passionate characters survive and thrive against the indifferent arc of history. And it definitely is a history. As you can tell, this is a very long book. So I'm waiting to set aside a fair amount of time so I can go through and give it the attention it deserves. I also got this book, Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. So just like Pachinko, I actually watched the film version of this on Netflix first and was really intrigued and kind of creeped out by the plot. So I decided to give the book a chance and kind of see if it would answer any of the questions that I had while watching the movie. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about this book, but I wanted to give it a chance and kind of form my own opinion. Basically, if you don't know anything about the book or film, it's about a wealthy white couple from New York that goes on a short vacation in upstate New York, and they end up becoming stranded there because a national blackout happens. Long story short, a lot of weird and bizarre things start happening to their family, and the other family that owns the vacation home where this family is staying, they show up, and things get pretty eerie pretty quickly. I thought the movie was also a really interesting depiction about how people tend to respond to a crisis, specifically how human nature tends to veer towards a more selfish side. This is Big Girl Small Town by Michelle Gallen. So Michelle was one of the speakers at the Women in Northern Ireland event that I got to attend. Even while talking about really heavy topics like the Troubles, she was hilarious and everyone was constantly laughing. So when she read an excerpt of this book at the lecture, I knew I really wanted to get a copy of her book. To give you an idea of what it's about, it says, meet Magella O'Neill, a heroine like no other. Magella is happiest out of the spotlight, away from her neighbor's stares and the gossips of the small town in Northern Ireland where she grew up in the wakes of the Trouble. She lives a quiet life caring for her alcoholic mother, working in the local chip shop, watching the regular customers come and go. But underneath Magella's seemingly ordinary life are the facts that she doesn't know where her father is. and that every person in her town has been changed by the lingering divide between Protestants and Catholics. In fact, there just may be a whole big world outside her small town. Also, once again, Michelle signed this book for me, which was so nice. To be honest, I did start reading this book, but I had to stop just a few pages in because I realized there is so much Northern Ireland slang that I didn't understand what was going on. So I decided that I'm gonna set this book aside until I have some time to sit down with my computer so I can read this while looking up all of the slang and what it means. The next book on this list was actually recommended by an English professor at Columbia's English department. It's A Girl's Story by Annie Ernaux. It was translated from French by Alison L. Strayer, and it won the Nobel Prize in 2022, so it collected quite a few accolades. It's kind of hard to explain this book if you haven't read it, so I just want to read the back of it where it says, "In A Girl's Story, Annie Ernaux revisits the season 50 years earlier when she found herself overpowered by another's will and desire. In the summer of 1958, 18-year-old Ernaux submits her will to a man's, and then he moves on, leaving her without a master, bereft. Now, 50 years later, she finds herself able to obliterate the intervening years and return to consider this young woman that she had long wanted to forget completely, and to discover that here, submerged in shame, humiliation, and betrayal, but also in self-discovery and self-reliance, lies the origin of her writing life." I thought the translation was incredible, and I wish I could read it in French, just given how lyrical and beautiful all the writing was. The book is a fairly quick read, but it's really beautiful. I spent a lot of time thinking about it after I read it. Would definitely recommend. The next book is Heaven by Miyako Kawakami. Just like A Girl's Story by Annie Ernaux, this book was also recommended by an English professor on the winter break reading list. This book was a finalist for the International Booker Prize and was translated from Japanese. The description on the back says, "In Heaven, an introspective middle school student is subjected to systematic bullying by his classmates, and there is only one person seemingly capable of understanding his torment, a young girl named Kojima, who suffers a similar fate. Each finds solace in the other, but also a surprising new perspective on their predicaments." I read this book in 2 sittings also, just like A Girl's Story, and it was really difficult to read in terms of the events, but in terms of the prose, it was such beautiful writing. I think it painted such an honest portrayal of how kids view the world around them, and it really considered a lot of profound questions related to morality and what's right versus wrong and why we do the things we do. The last chapter of this book is also beautiful, and spoiler alert, because I just want to read the last few lines, I went back and kept rereading them over and over again because it's just some gorgeous prose. "Everything was beautiful. At the end of the street, a street I had walked down more times than I could count, I saw the other side for the first time, glowing white. I understood it. Through my tears, I saw the world come into focus. The world had depth now. It had another side. I opened my eyes as wide as I could, fighting to see it all. Everything that I could see was beautiful. I cried and cried, standing there, surrounded by that beauty. Even though I wasn't standing anywhere, I could hear the sound of my own tears. Everything was beautiful. Not that there was anyone to share it with, anyone to tell, just the beauty." In a slight change of themes, the next book on this list is really good actually by Monica Heisey, I believe. Unfortunately, I am worried that this might be a book I return to Barnes & Noble. Unfortunately, even in talking to a friend about this book, she informed me that she had heard this book was really bad actually. And I'm not sure if I've made up my mind about it yet. I did start reading it and I got about 80 pages in and stopped reading it, so I don't think that's a good sign. I have had experiences before where I have to get past the first 100, sometimes even 150 pages of a book before I can get into it. So I will probably eventually give this book another try and see if I can finish it. This book is advertised as a comedy, and the book jacket definitely grabbed me. The description is, "Maggie is fine. She's doing really good, actually. Sure, she's broke, her graduate thesis on something obscure is going nowhere, and her marriage only lasted 608 days. But at the ripe old age of 29, Maggie is determined to embrace her new life as a surprisingly young divorcee." I thought it was going to be pretty witty and fun, and I tend to enjoy books about people getting over heartbreak. However, there was something very, very obnoxious about the main character, and I just found her kind of unlikable. I'm also realizing the problem with reading books about people during breakups is that because we don't ever really see the time that they spent with their spouse, it's hard for me to care about their spouse and care about their heartbreak that they're facing now that they're no longer with this spouse. This is a book I'm really excited to read. It is The End of the World is a Cul-de-sac by Louise Kennedy. So Louise Kennedy is also an Irish author who grew up in Belfast. If you couldn't tell, I'm really getting into my Irish literature phase. And I thought the cover was really fascinating, and so was the title, which is why I grabbed the book. Then the book jacket opens with a quote by Joseph O'Connor from the Irish Times, which reads, "Brilliant dark stories of women's lives by a very major talent," which was enough to grab me. And the rest of the description is, in these visceral, stunningly crafted stories by the author of the much-acclaimed Trespasses, women's lives are etched by poverty, material, emotional, sexual, but also splashed by beauty, sometimes even joy, as they search for the good in the cards they've been dealt. A wife is abandoned by her new husband in a derelict housing estate with blood on her hands. An expectant mother's worst fears about her husband's entanglement with a teenage girl are confirmed. A sister is tormented by visions of the man her brother murdered during the Troubles. A woman struggles to forgive herself after an abortion threatens to destroy her marriage. Plumbing the depths of intimacy, violence, and redemption, these stories are dazzling, heartbreaking, keen to share the lessons of a lifetime. I haven't started this one yet, but I'm really looking forward to reading it. The next book is Holding Pattern by Jenny Xie. What grabbed me about this book was definitely the cover. The book jacket also really intrigued me. It says, Holding Pattern, noun. 1. A state of suspended progress. 2. The awkward way your mother tries to hug you now that you live with her again. So that's just part of the book jacket, but as you can see, I did start reading this book, and I'm sort of reading it right now. I'm about 60 pages in, and I have really enjoyed it. I did just take a break because I really wanted to start another book, which I'm about to get to. So another reason I picked up this book is because the author, Jenny, is a recipient of a Bread Loaf Scholarship, which is a scholarship that I've heard a lot about, very prestigious. So when I saw that, I felt like I could definitely trust her as a writer. And as I said, I do tend to be interested in books about people getting over heartbreak, but I did find this one different from Really Good Actually, where in Really Good Actually, I found the protagonist pretty whiny and annoying, and it was hard for me to kind of relate to her, understand, or root for her. In this one, the protagonist, Kathleen, I felt like I got to know a lot more about her as a person and the relationship she did have. And so overall, it was just a more enjoyable story to me so far. So hopefully I'll finish reading it pretty soon. We're on the second to last book, which is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. So this is actually the book I started reading concurrently while I was reading Holding Pattern because I was just really interested in the premise and wanted to read it. I've seen the cover of this a couple of times at the bookstore, and I finally decided to go ahead and get it. So the book is inspired by the real-life sorority targeted by America's first celebrity serial killer. And it's told from the perspective of the chapter president of the sorority and kind of unfolds all of the events that happened following the murders. Jessica Knoll is also the author of Luckiest Girl Alive, which I've heard a lot about, so I figured I would give this book a shot. I'm definitely looking forward to continuing this because I've enjoyed it so far. Or as much as one can with a book about such dark content. The next book is actually a classic novel told in 4 volumes, and it is A Dream of Red Mansions by Cao Xuexin and Gao E. This collection was actually a gift from my mom for Christmas, and I'm really grateful because I definitely want to read this. This was actually my grandfather's favorite book and something he always hoped someone else in the family would read, so I kind of hope that I can fulfill that wish by one day finishing this. Reading the description on the back, it says, "The celebrated Chinese classic novel is a masterpiece of realism written in the middle of the 18th century. Taking as its background the decline of several related big families and drawing much from his own experiences, the author Cao Xuexin focused on a tragic love between Jia Baoyu and Lin Daiyu, and, in the meantime, provided a panorama of the lives of people of various levels in the degenerating empire. But he left the work unfinished, or the last 40 chapters were lost. Gao E completed the work some years later in much of Gao's spirit and also put in his own revelations, which aroused protracted controversy throughout the centuries. Exposing social evils, the book cries out its denunciation against the feudal system. All techniques of literary merit developed in previous periods were incorporated into the great work with much originality. It stands out in world literature, ranking with Hamlet and War and Peace." So this book is one of the masterpieces of East Asian literature, definitely a big part of the canon. If you're also looking to read this book and curious about which translation it is, this specific edition was published by Foreign Language Press and translated by Young Xian Yi and Gladys Young. So I actually lied when I said Bright Young Woman was the second to last book. There is one more, and it is a collection of illustrated haikus. So I saw this at the book annex at Barnes & Noble, and I just had to have it. I mean, the cover is just gorgeous, and the inside is even more beautiful. And if you're curious, it was translated by Hart Larrabee. So this book basically includes a bunch of haikus by various Japanese poets and attaches beautiful illustrations to them. Just to give you some examples of what the art in this book looks like, we have the haiku written in Japanese and the English translation, and then gorgeous photography or art next to it. Some of my favorite sections include this part, which reads, "Snowfall outside, sootfall inside, such is home." And this, which says, "Is this then where I live out my days, 5 feet of snow?" So this is just a beautiful collection that I'm really excited to own. Well, thanks for watching my book haul. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and hope you want to check out some of these books. Happy reading! Bye!